So bone cells. Again, before we talk about chondroblasts, chondro for cartilage. Now we're going to replace that prefix, chondro, with osteo. Osteoblasts are these guys right here. And notice that here's one osteoblast. Here's another, here's another, here's another. Notice how intricately linked they are together. That's going to be very important. Now, each of these links are called a cell process. And the cell process allows movement of ions, calcium phosphate. It allows movement of nutrients, oxygen, right, glucose, from cell to cell to cell. So then it becomes possible to bring nutrients to cells that are way out here when the blood vessel is way over here, right? Because these cells are interconnected, we can bring nutrients to just about every one of these cells are connected to because of the presence of these cell processes. Now, these cell processes are very important because as we start to put bone material down, bone material is dense, is tough, is very solid. Gases will not be able to diffuse through that. So you're not going to have direct nutrient exchange between a cell way out here and a blood vessel way inside here, right? What happens is the only way this cell, being so far away from the blood vessel, receives nutrients is because of these cell processes, allowing each cell to connect to other cells. So these cell processes, as we ossify, as we replace this material with bone tissue, we never cut off these cell processes. We always build bone, all right? Build a bone around the cell process. So then, as you build bone around the cell process right here, we never cut off the connecting points. There are always these connecting points. Now, what would happen, probably easier way to imagine this is, what would happen if we did cut off these connecting points, right? When we did cut off these connecting points, right here, then these cells will no longer be connected to these cells. They would not receive any nutrients. They will die, right? By having the presence of these cell processes, they allow us to bring nutrients to cells that are very far away. So then those cells can still be alive, they can still form new bone material. The process of forming bone material is called ossification, right? Osteoblasts communicate through gap junctions called cell processes. The gap junctions allow you to bring nutrients, to get rid of waste, allow you to bring calcium and phosphate, all that stuff from cell to cell. Once these cells have completely made the bone matrix, it changes name. It's now called an osteocyte, right? Now, have you guys felt the real bone yet on the actual, in lab? If you felt the real bone, you realize how sharp real bone really is, right? If you only use the plastic models, and I don't want you to use the real bones if you're not comfortable, but I do want you to feel it in open lab. The reason why is simple. I want you to see how light it really is, right? Not only is it lighter than you'd imagine, it's actually a little bit less dense than you imagine as well, and it's much sharper. So what happens is, as we form this bone material, to protect the cell from the bone material itself, there's a little bit of fluid that it's resting on. Again, that fluid is called the lacunae. So the lacunae right here is a fluid-filled space where we actually find the osteocytes. And then you have from this cell processes that are, and then bone building around the cell process, right? The cell process and the bone that's built around it is called the canaliculi. So the canaliculi are canals of bone tissue where the cell processes are found, right? Imagine that you have a tunnel, right? And then you're gonna have the cell process found in the tunnel. Nutrients diffuse through tiny amount of liquid surrounding the cell, filling up the lacunae. So this one will receive the oxygen, right? They'll receive the glucose, all the nutrients and waste, and then they'll pass it on to the next cell they're connected to. They can have direct transfer of nutrients through the gap junctions found in these cell processes. Again, important to note that this is the only way we bring nutrients to all of these cells way out here. The other type of cells, the first two type of cells, osteoblasts, osteocytes. They're basically the same thing, right? One is a mature version of the other. That's it. These are different. These osteoclasts, all right, osteoblasts, osteocytes, they're the same. Osteoclasts are different, right? Number one, they don't make any bone, they destroy bone. By destroying bone or resorbing bone, we allow calcium to be released back into the bloodstream. So then we can increase our intravascular calcium. The main purpose of this bone resorption is to break down so then we can rebuild. Again, rebuilding is important. It keeps that bone material nice, fresh, and strong. How else is this different? These osteoclasts are derived from white blood cells. Specific ones we call monocytes. So the other ones, osteoblasts, right, come from these osteochondral progenitor cells. I know it's a big name, right? Basically stem cells that will turn into either chondroblasts or osteoblasts. So stem cells that are found at that site of that bone or cartilage, right? These osteoclasts are formed in the red bone marrow. As they're formed in the red bone marrow, they were white blood cells that modifies and enters the rest of your bone tissue. As they enter the bone tissue, they turn into osteoclasts. And instead of fighting off infection now, like white blood cells do, the main purpose is to resorb bone so then we can destroy it and we can remodel it. Now these stem cells right here, and they have tried, right? Remember when I mentioned that it's hard to rebuild that cartilage? They have tried kind of grafting these stem cells into the area that we need that new cartilage growth, and none of it has ever seeded. So even that doesn't work. So this is the actual osteoclast. Anybody watch SpongeBob? Looks like the jellyfish in SpongeBob, right? So these, cells right here are very large, and the main purpose is to resorb bone to release calcium phosphate. And now you release it, and you've kind of destroyed that old bone. Now you can rebuild it. Woven bone, remodeling, and then lamellar bone, and we'll talk about these compact bones, and we'll take a break. So what is woven bone? Woven bone contains fibers of collagen that are randomly oriented, meaning that, right, they're just random. Why is that important? We're going to see that in our bones, we don't want random orientation of these collagen fibers, right? So we want collagen fibers to be along the line of stress. So then it's really strong because it has to take your body weight against gravity. So we want an ordered process for bone and ordered collagen fibers. Now, when we see woven bone, I want you to think that it's a stopgap bone. Whether we're forming bone initially, early on, or, right, during fracture repair, or when you're kind of moving your teeth around when you are trying to remodel your teeth by putting braces on. So woven bone is a stopgap type of bone to ensure there's less damage to the bone if it happens post-injury after a fracture occurs. It's just that initial bone we form. And then we start replacing that bone almost immediately. So again, this woven bone is just that initial bone that we form. It's not super strong because the collagen fibers are really randomly oriented. And in reality, right, all of our bones need to take weight a certain way. Your femur has to support your body weight against gravity. So we want all of our fibers to be super strong and oriented in one direction. That's not the case with woven bone. So woven bone will be replaced by remodeling. As we remodel, woven bone is then remodeled into stronger lamellar bone. Lamella means rings, right? That's what lamella means, right? Rings. So I want you to think about an onion, right? You have many rings around that onion. That's the lamella. So lamellar bone are rings of bone kind of circling each other. That's a mature bone. They're formed in sheets that then turns into a ring. Fibers are oriented in one direction in one layer. So all the fibers will be forming, right? There's no randomness. So on one layer, all the collagen fibers go up and down. And then a second layer, all the collagen goes laterally. So then you have strength in multiple directions. It's not random. Lamellar bone will be found in compact and spongy. So in spongy bone, here's one lamella. Here's another lamella. Here's another one. These are sheets of bone tissue that you twist into a circle. As you twist it in a circle, right here, you make it stronger. And then you have another layer of bone sheet that you twist in a circle surrounding that one. And then another one. The more layers, the stronger it becomes. Now, the thing about spongy bone is that they're found in areas where you don't have a lot of, you don't need that super strength, right? You want strength, but you also want to lighten up the bone, and you want empty spaces. Empty spaces here all the way around. Empty spaces for red bone marrow, right? So spongy bone regions are where we usually see red bone marrow. Again, right? Spongy bone contains trabecula. So if we're looking, trabecula are just kind of these moving out branches of bone tissue. When we look at one branch of bone tissue right here, we see that it has rings of lamellar bone. But it only has these rings and nothing next to it, right? Open space next to it. That open space will be filled with red bone marrow. It's strong, but not as strong as the next type, right? But again, that's not the sole purpose of this, not strength. If we want strength and only strength, we'll see the next type, compact bone, right? Here we want some strength, but we also want more room. So then we can have the bone marrow found here. Spaces are filled with red bone marrow, site of hematopoiesis, blood cell production, oriented along the collagen, oriented along the stress lines. So then you can see that all these fibers allows us to disperse our body weight from the head of the femur to the shaft of the femur, where the stronger compact bone is, right? By having the collagen right here, distribute your body weight down where it's right there, right? It allows us to distribute the body weight into the stronger bone tissue area. If it was all just random or it just goes laterally, all the collagen would be faced laterally like this, instead of going up and down. Well, you put a lot of stress onto the head and the neck of the femur then. You will fracture the neck more commonly. The next type of bone, there's only two, is compact bone. Compact bone are the ones that we saw on our histology, right? This is the tree rings. This is the growth around a middle central canal filled with an artery, a central artery. So you have this central artery right down the middle, and then all these dots are osteocytes that has already built the bone material, and now they're surrounded by their bone material. And it looks like a tree ring, doesn't it? And what we're gonna see is this is gonna be somewhat similar to what we saw here, in that they're rings. The difference is this, right? For compact bone, you have one ring here, and then another one over here, and then another one next to that over here, and then another ring over here. You have multiple rings clustered together tightly, right? And when you have a lot of these rings, each one's strong, But now you have a lot of them, you have an additive strength here. That's what we see in compact bone. In spongy bone, all we see is a ring here and then open space. A ring of bone material here and then lots of open space. So it's not that you have another ring next to it for additive strength, right? That's the difference between these two, right? In compact bone, you have these rings of, right, lamellar bone, and then another ring next to it, and then another ring next to it, and then another ring next to it. And then you have other osteocytes connecting those rings. So then you have additive super strength as a result. Now, the lamella has three different types: concentric, circumferential, and interstitial. The concentric are the types of lamellar bone that's closest to the central canal where the artery is. So that's these guys right here in the first two layers. The circumferential ones are the ones way out here, as far away as possible. Any farther away, you're too far away from the blood source. And again, if you look real carefully on this picture, let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. If you look real carefully, you'll see what looks like little cracks here, right? Those little cracks between the cells, those cracks are where the cell processes are. That's a canaliculi. That allows us to attach one cell to the next, to the next, to the next. But eventually, right, by the time you get way out here, all of the nutrients are gone. So there's a limit to how big each of these, right, lamellar areas can become. These rings can only get so large. What else do we see? Right? We call one ring an osteon, and it includes a central canal and the multiple types of concentric and circumferential lamella. Interstitial lamella are the ones that are way out here, right? Kind of floating by itself. They are going to link one osteon to the next. It's like a glue that allows you to keep them together so then they can handle the stresses. Now, we do also see these kind of perpendicular areas every now and then, right? Those are called the perforating or Volkmann's canal. They're perpendicular to the long axis, meaning like if this is the femur, what happens is all of these osteons are going up and down. There's a one going up and down, another one next to it going up and down, another going up and down next to those, right? And what happened to these Volkmann's canal is you're going to have blood vessel that penetrates deep inwards, right? These Volkmann's canal contains arteries that allow you to bring blood to the deeper osteons. So then we'll always have fresh blood flow. And again, we need continuous blood. If we don't, if there's damage, well, you can't heal and repair if there are no nutrients available, if there's no calcium phosphate available, right? Where do we get that calcium phosphate? From the bloodstream. Right, just review these. We kind of mentioned what they are: the concentric, circumferential, and interstitial. Kind of discuss those Volkmann's canal. Those are blood vessels from the outside. The outside of the cell, or the outside of the bone, is called the periosteum. The blood vessels start in the periosteum, and then you have these canals that bring it deeper inside, so where all your central canals are formed, right? You can have a central canal, but if you don't have something connecting to it, you're not going to have blood flowing at all. You just have an empty vessel. You need some way to bring that blood in. That's where the Volkmann's canal comes in. All right, let's take a little break.